You checked your bank account this morning. The balance was lower than you expected. Not by much, maybe $100, maybe less. You scrolled through the transactions, looking for the error. Groceries, gas, that dinner last week, all accounted for. But the number still felt wrong, so you kept scrolling. And then you saw them, the small charges. $7 here, 15 there, 23, 11, 9.99. Each one attached to a name you vaguely recognized but didn't quite remember signing up for. And the feeling that settled in wasn't panic. It was something quieter, a low hum of confusion. Because you're not careless with money, you don't overspend, you're careful. And yet somehow, without making a single bad decision, money has been leaving your account in ways you can't fully explain. Most people assume that losing control of their finances happens dramatically. A big purchase, a sudden emergency, a streak of bad luck. Those are the moments we're taught to watch for. The visible threats. But there's another way money disappears. One that doesn't feel like spending at all. It feels like maintenance, like keeping things running. Like the cost of living in a world that requires you to pay monthly just to keep your life organized. Subscriptions don't feel like purchases. They feel like infrastructure. And that difference, that subtle shift in how we categorize these payments, is where the trap actually lives. Here's what most advice gets wrong. It treats subscription spending as a discipline problem, as if the solution is just to be more careful, more organized, more aware. But that advice assumes the problem is you, that you're forgetting or being lazy or not paying attention. And maybe that's part of it. But the deeper issue isn't forgetfulness. It's that subscriptions are designed to live in a part of your financial life where scrutiny doesn't naturally happen. They're not impulse purchases. They're not big-ticket items. They're background payments. And your brain has a specific way of handling background payments. It stops tracking them as spending at all. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called mental accounting. It's the way your brain sorts money into invisible categories, even though rationally all money is the same. A dollar is a dollar. But that's not how it feels. Money in your savings account feels different than money in your wallet. Money earmarked for rent feels untouchable. Money left over after bills feels free. Your brain doesn't see one pool of resources. It sees separate buckets, each with its own emotional weight and set of rules. And subscriptions. Subscriptions have a unique ability to slip between those buckets entirely. They're too small to feel like major expenses, too predictable to feel like impulse buys, too useful to feel like waste. So they end up in a category that doesn't get reviewed. They become part of the background cost of existence. And once something becomes background, your brain stops counting it as a decision you're actively making. This is where the mechanism actually operates. Not in the moment you sign up, but in the months and years after, when the charge keeps appearing and your brain keeps categorizing it as infrastructure rather than choice. When you sign up for a subscription, there's a moment of evaluation. You weigh the cost, you consider the value, you make a decision. But the next month, when the charge processes again, there's no decision. It's automatic. And the month after that, it's even more automatic. Within a few cycles, the subscription stops being something you chose and starts being something that simply exists. Your brain doesn't revisit it. Because revisiting would require you to treat it like a purchase again. And it doesn't feel like a purchase anymore. It feels like rent, or utilities, or the cost of having internet. It feels like something you can't not pay. And here's the secondary effect that makes this so difficult to escape. Subscriptions don't just avoid scrutiny. They actively accumulate. Because each one, individually, is small enough to justify $15 a month for music streaming. That's reasonable. $10 for cloud storage. Necessary. $8 for a meditation app. An investment in your mental health. $12 for meal planning templates. Saves you time. None of these decisions is wrong. None of them is reckless. Each one, in isolation, makes perfect sense, but they don't exist in isolation. They exist together. And your brain doesn't naturally add them up, because they're not processed as a group. They're processed individually, each in its own moment, each below the threshold of financial concern. So the total grows without ever triggering the alarm that a large expense would. You can be spending $200 a month on subscriptions and never have a single moment where you felt like you overspent. Because you never made a $200 decision. You made 20 $10 decisions, spread across months or years, each one defensible on its own. There's another layer here that makes this worse. Subscriptions don't just avoid your attention in the present. They exploit the way your memory works. When you think about your monthly expenses, what comes to mind? Rent, insurance, your phone bill, maybe your car payment, the big fixed costs. Those are the expenses your brain has encoded as significant. But the smaller subscriptions, those don't encode the same way. You might remember that you have Netflix. But do you remember the exact amount it costs? Do you remember when you upgraded to the premium plan? Do you remember the other streaming service you signed up for during a free trial 6 months ago and forgot to cancel? Probably not, because your brain doesn't store every small recurring transaction with the same fidelity it stores major expenses. It lets the details blur, and in that blur, charges keep processing without you ever forming a clear memory of having committed to them. And then there are the annual subscriptions, the ones that bill once a year. These operate on an even longer loop of invisibility. You sign up in January, you use the service for a few weeks, maybe a month. Then it fades into the background of your life. You stop opening the app, you stop thinking about it, but it's still there, quietly sitting in the roster of things you pay for. And 11 months later, in December, the charge hits. $60, $120, sometimes more. And for a moment, you're confused, because you don't remember making a purchase. You have to check your email, search through old confirmations, piece together what this charge even is. And by the time you figure it out, it's already processed. The money is gone, and you're left with the same choice you had a year ago. Cancel it now, or let it renew again because, well, you already paid for it this year. Maybe you'll use it. Maybe it's worth keeping. And so it continues. Another year of background cost. Another cycle of invisible spending. Let's walk through what this actually looks like in practice. Imagine someone, call them Jordan. Jordan earns a comfortable income, not wealthy, but stable. Enough to cover bills, save a little, live without constant financial stress. Jordan is responsible, checks their account regularly, doesn't carry credit card debt, hasn't made any major financial mistakes. And yet, over the course of 3 years, Jordan has accumulated 11 subscriptions. It didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually, one reasonable decision at a time. First, music streaming. $10 a month. Essential, really. Everyone has it. Then a video streaming service. $13. Movies on demand instead of cable. Saves money, actually. Then cloud storage, because the free tier ran out. $3 a month. Barely noticeable. Then a second streaming service, because one show Jordan wanted to watch wasn't available anywhere else. $9. Just for a month initially. But then there was another show, and another. So it stayed. Then a productivity app. $7, worth it if it saves even an hour of time. Then a recipe subscription service. $6, cheaper than buying cookbooks. Then a language learning app. $15. An investment in personal growth. Then a meditation app. $13. Mental health is important. Then a password manager. $4. Security is non-negotiable. Then a budgeting app. $8. Helps track spending, ironically. Then a news subscription. $10. Staying informed matters. Add it all up, and Jordan is spending $98 a month on subscriptions. Nearly $1,200 a year. But here's the critical part. Jordan has never once felt like they made a $1,200 decision, because they didn't. They made 11 separate small decisions, each perfectly rational, each falling below the threshold of what feels like significant spending. And because each charge hits on a different day of the month, they never appear together on a single screen. Jordan sees them as individual, isolated costs, not as a collective financial pattern. Now let's go deeper. Of those 11 subscriptions, Jordan actively uses 4. Music streaming daily. 1 video streaming service, a few times a week. Cloud storage, passively but necessary. The password manager, constantly. Those 4 are clear value. But the other 7, those exist in a gray zone. The second streaming service gets open maybe once a month. The productivity app was used heavily for the first 2 weeks, then sporadically, then not at all. The recipe subscription delivered interesting ideas initially, but now Jordan just Googles recipes. The language learning app was ambitious. Used for 3 weeks straight, then abandoned when life got busy. The meditation app, same story. Enthusiastic start, gradual decline. Now it just sits there. The budgeting app sends weekly emails Jordan doesn't open. The news subscription. Jordan still reads news, but mostly through free sources now. The paid subscription provides access to archives and special reports Jordan meant to explore but never has. So here's the actual math. Jordan is paying $98 a month, but Jordan is only extracting consistent value from about $38 of that. The other $60, that's paying for optionality, for the feeling of having access, for the possibility of using something again someday, for avoiding the mild discomfort of canceling. And this is where the psychological shift happens. Because once you've paid for something for several months, canceling doesn't feel like a smart financial decision. It feels like losing access to something you might need, even if you haven't used it in months, even if you can resubscribe anytime. The act of canceling creates a sense of loss. And your brain weighs loss more heavily than gain, so you keep paying, not because the service provides value, but because stopping payment feels like giving something up. This is the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The invisible cost isn't just the money, it's the mental weight. Because even though these subscriptions are automated, they still require decisions. Every few months, you have a moment where you notice one. Maybe you see the charge. Maybe you get a renewal email. And in that moment, you have to decide, keep it or cancel it. And making that decision requires effort. It requires evaluating whether you've used it, whether you might use it in the future, whether it's worth the hassle of canceling, whether you'll regret losing access. That evaluation is cognitive work. And if you're doing it for 11 different subscriptions, multiple times a year, that's a lot of low-level decision fatigue that never resolves. It's always there, humming quietly in the background, a running list of small, unresolved financial questions that your brain keeps postponing. And here's what makes it even more complicated. Canceling subscriptions isn't always easy. Some companies make it simple. A button in your account settings, 2 clicks, done. But others don't. Some require you to call. Some require you to navigate through multiple confirmation screens designed to make you reconsider. Some offer you a discount if you stay, which resets the evaluation process entirely. Some make you explain why you're leaving. Some process your cancellation but keep billing you for the remainder of the current period, which feels like paying for something you've already decided to stop. All of this adds friction. And friction discourages action. So even when you know you should cancel something, the effort required makes it easier to just leave it. For now, maybe next month, maybe when you have more time. And next month, the same logic applies. So it continues. The shift that needs to happen isn't about willpower. It's not about being more disciplined or more organized. It's about changing the way you see these payments. Right now, they feel like infrastructure, like the baseline cost of participating in modern life. But they're not infrastructure. They're choices. Active, ongoing choices that your brain has simply stopped recognizing as choices. And the first step toward changing the pattern is making those choices visible again. Not by tracking every dollar obsessively, not by cutting everything and living on a minimum viable lifestyle, but by stepping back and asking a different kind of question. Not, can I afford this? But, is this still serving me? Because here's the reframe. You can afford $98 a month in subscriptions. That's not the issue. The issue is that 60 of those dollars are going toward things that aren't adding anything meaningful to your life. They're not bringing joy, they're not saving time, they're not creating value. They're just there, occupying space in your financial life without purpose. And the cost isn't just $60. It's the mental clutter, the ongoing low-level awareness that you're paying for things you don't use, the vague guilt every time you see the charge and think, I should cancel that, but don't. The feeling of being slightly out of control of your own spending, even though you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. That feeling, that's the actual subscription trap. Not the money leaving your account, but the way these payments quietly erode your sense of financial clarity. So the reorientation isn't about canceling everything. It's about treating subscriptions the way you'd treat any other purchase, as something that needs to justify its existence continuously, not just at the moment you sign up. In the physical world, you wouldn't keep buying something every month if you stopped using it. You'd notice, you'd stop. But digital subscriptions don't take up space. They don't clutter your home, they don't give you any physical reminder that they exist, so they can sit in your financial life indefinitely without ever forcing a reckoning. The shift is to create that reckoning intentionally, not as a punishment, not as an exercise in deprivation, but as a way of ensuring that your money is actually aligned with your life. That the things you're paying for are the things you're using. That your financial decisions aren't just running on autopilot, quietly accumulating costs you stopped noticing years ago. This doesn't require a spreadsheet. It doesn't require an app. It just requires a different lens. Once every few months, look at your bank statement. Not to judge yourself, not to feel guilty, but to simply ask, Do I still want this? And if the answer is no, or even if the answer is, I'm not sure, cancel it. You can always resubscribe later if you actually need it. But most of the time you won't, because most of the things we subscribe to aren't things we need. They're things we thought we might need, or things we used to need, or things we wanted to need, and the difference between those categories. That's where $1,000 a year quietly disappears. The subscriptions you actually value, those aren't the problem. Keep those. Pay for them without guilt. They're worth it. But the ones that exist only because you haven't canceled them yet, those are costing you more than money. They're costing you clarity. And clarity, in your financial life, is worth protecting. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to optimize every dollar. But you do need to know where your money is going. Not roughly, not approximately. Actually know. Because the trap isn't the $15. It's the $15 you forgot was leaving. And once you stop forgetting, the trap stops working.